Okay, welcome to this edition of Brown Family Memories.
The beginning of the Earl and Christy Brown family. We're recording this for our posterity, so if you're watching this, you're probably related to us as a child or grandchild, great-grandchild. I don't know. How many generations are there now? Right now, just children. So, we thought we'd tell you a little bit about how we met and got to know each other and fell in love. You want to start?
Okay, so it all starts in P-Town, Provo, Utah, in a prep class. So I saw a sign somewhere on campus. I was a student at BYU and currently actually on BYU's campus in my office on the JFSB. A sign about teaching literacy in rural Mexico for a summer. And I thought, yeah, that sounds kind of fun, adventuresome. So signed up for it. And there was a prep course during the winter semester before going in the summer. And 3 days a week. The first day, Monday, was with the other students going on different programs throughout the world with the Kennedy Center. And Christy and I met in that class.
So it was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. On Wednesday and Friday, it was just our little group that was going to Mexico, and there were 9 of us. Me and 7 other girls and Earl. So we met together twice a week, starting January of 2000, and then we went down to Mexico at the end of April 2000. And we spent, so we had planned it because we were coming from all over the country, I think. And we had planned it that there were some of us that were going to be getting into the airport at the same time. So we thought, okay, we'll meet up at the airport. And the director, I guess, of our group told us which hotel we were going to go to. And so we met up and then we found a taxi to the hotel. And I was there with a couple of other girls in the airport for quite a while, waiting for Earl to get there. And one of the girls in particular was very young and innocent. Anyway, she was just kind of wandering around like she didn't know where she was going. And I thought, oh, this is the type of person that is going to get preyed on. So I was like, okay, come on, let's stick together. Let's act like we know where we're going. Let's find a place to be and wait. And so we did. And we were watching for his flight. And finally he showed up. And so it was just the 4 of us, right?
I believe so, yeah. 4 of us in that taxi.
So we got a taxi and met up with the other 5 girls at the hotel in Mexico City. And we were there for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Something like that.
This was the pre-cell phone days, so it was,
Back in the old days before cell phones, you had to make plans ahead of time and say, okay, this is where we're going to be at this time. And if someone was leaving the group or, a few people were going a different way, you decided ahead of time, okay, we'll meet up at this place in an hour or 2 hours or whatever. And so we had plans like that. But mostly we stuck together for those 2 or 3 days or whatever that we were in Mexico City.
So yeah, after a couple days, can't remember exactly, 3, give or take, we traveled up to the state of Guanajuato in central Mexico, or like west and north a bit from Mexico City, where we were going to be together, well, not together, in 4 different villages close to each other. Everyone would have at least one other student in the village with them. And so Christy and I and another girl got assigned just by happenstance to the same village, Comedero, which is a small village in the state of Guanajuato, near Irapuato. Irapuato is the bigger city. And so a typical day was just trying to like find students who would be interested in learning how to read and write or improve their reading and writing skills.
In Spanish. We weren't teaching English. We were teaching how to read and write in Spanish.
Yeah. So it was very much like missionary work. It reminded me very much of missionary work, like just going in, like knocking on doors and say, "Hey, I'm here to teach literacy. Anyone want
Are
to
you interested?
learn or improve their literacy skills in Spanish, my second language, but you're first." But then, you got students, and often there were like carryover students from previous BYU students who had been in those villages before us. So typical day was just, make appointments, stop by. It was basically like tutoring, just going around to people's houses and doing one-on-one tutoring. So yeah, it's very interesting.
We did have curriculum that was given to us through the Mexican government. And so we had the different course books or whatever. And so first we had to figure out, where our students were. And I had a student who literally one of the first things I taught her was how to hold a pencil. So from that end of the spectrum to another student who was probably middle school level in her education. And then, all along that continuum, students of all levels. And, they lived in a very rural area where they planted their crops, they harvested their crops, and that's what they lived on. They built their homes out of rocks and mud. They didn't at that time have running water in the village. And so that was their life. And so part of what we had to teach them was why it was important to know how to read and write, because in that life, they didn't always see a big value to knowing how to read. There weren't signs around town. There were probably 4 or 5 families with, several of their kids, and then, they had their spouses who had married in from other villages or whatever. But it was, handful of patriarchs basically, and their children in that village. And so that's what we did.
Yeah, it was like stepping back in time, because they didn't have running water. When we were there, they were some government agency, I guess, I don't know, was putting in pipes above the ground to carry water around the village. But there was no running water when we were there, which meant there was no bathrooms. Some other previous government agent, or I don't know if it's the same one or a different one, had built a few outhouses around town, but they didn't use them. They used them for to store their firewood to keep them. Anyway, they didn't use the outhouses for its intended purpose.
Yeah.
It's like
That's
stepping
too
back
restrictive,
in time.
Yeah, so they really were subsistence farmers. They planted what they needed, and that's what they ate. Some of the people in the village, particularly women, hadn't even left the village or very infrequently. And so there was a bus that came to the village 3 times a day, I think. One in the early morning, one a little later in the morning, and then once in the evening.
I think so, yeah, sounds about right.
So 3 times a day there was a bus that came. Most families did not have a car. They had cobbled streets. They were made out of rocks.
There weren't even streets, really, just kind of pathways.
Yeah, that's true.
There's the main road into town into this little opening area where the bus would stop and people would come to get on.
But yeah, it was paths beyond that. There were a few trucks maybe. Some people had donkeys, and that's how they carried firewood and stuff like that. But keep in mind, this is the year 2000, and although whoever's watching this is probably thinking, "Wow, that was so long ago," it wasn't so long ago that was typical outside of that area. Where we came from in the United States at that time, we definitely had running water.
Yeah. So we did some fun activities in and around the village. I was still a runner back then, and I would run. I don't know if every morning, but perhaps almost every morning. I don't know. Just go out onto the road that came into the village and just run down a bit and come back. I would stash my water bottles at one of the trees at the beginning of that route, so I could have water when I came back. But we'd find fun things to do when we weren't teaching. There was a a dam, a reservoir, La Presa in Spanish, that we went swimming to at least once, maybe twice, I'm not sure.
A couple of times, I think.
Anyway, it had, dung floating in it. So it probably wasn't our best decision to get in that water, but
Didn't kill us.
we were young and adventuresome.
Healthy.
It was fun.
We got there in April, and it was still the dry season at that point. So when we got there, it was totally brown. But we kept hearing, oh, just wait until the rains come, and everything will be so green and beautiful. And they would refer to this area in the village as the river. And there wasn't any water there when we got there. But I can't remember, maybe June or something. It did rain, and rained quite a bit. And then there was a river. And everything turned green, and it was really beautiful. And I have some pictures, both taken from the same vantage point, kind of above the village. One taken at the beginning, and one taken after the rains came. And it's a really stark contrast.
Maybe we'll flash those two images right in front of you. Go ahead and make this.
Put that in later.
Soup up this video. Yeah, so there were young boys.
We also. Oh, you're good.
There were young boys who had slings. They would use the slings to try and herd the goats out in the monte, out in the sticks, out in the fields. And so we had some boys make us some slings, some like David and Goliath slings, not like slingshots, like slings that you swing around and you. Mm-hmm. So we still have them 20 years later.
Yeah.
And our kids love to go to the park and sling stuff, tennis balls and stuff now.
A lot of kids in the village. And so their life really revolved around the planting season, the harvest season, stuff like that. But they did have different celebrations. I remember they had a school in the village. It only went through 6th grade. But graduation from 6th grade was a big deal. I guess promotion for all of the grades, really. Like at the end of the school year, big deal. And they had a big celebration and stuff. Anytime anybody, was born and baptized, there was a celebration. 3-year-old birthdays, for some reason, it's a cultural thing, and I'm not exactly sure why 3 had a great significance, but 3-year-old birthdays.
Yeah, one day I went to the school and to ask the teacher if she needed help, because there was just, I think, one teacher for K to 6 or 1 to 6. I don't know if they had K. And they had 2 rooms. They weren't contiguous. They weren't touching. Like there's this one building and there's another building. And they had the younger kids. I'm not sure if they were how young, what grade. But she's like, oh yeah, you can go in this. You can like teach them something here, the younger kids, and I'll go teach the older kids over there. So yeah, it was really stepping back in time with in many respects, including their education there in that village.
Mm-hmm. There were a number of families whose father had left to go work in the United States, and so mom was there with the kids. Or like the woman that I stayed with, the family I stayed with, Agustina and Martina, they had 9 children, and most of them lived right there in the village, and those children had grandchildren or had children, some of them. But I think 2 or 3 of the sons at one point went up to the United States while we were there and didn't make it in, and so they came back. And but there were a number of families like that where mom was just there with the kids, and dad was sending money back from whatever work he'd been able to find in the United States.
Yeah, I knew a coyote. The term coyote is coyote in English, but it's, if you don't know, it's a term that's used for people who help other people get across the border illegally, and that term has a bad rap. But seeing and living in the very rural, poverty-stricken village that we spent a summer in, it's not hard to see why they would risk crossing the border illegally. It was a really formative or educational experience for me.
Yeah.
To see firsthand why so many people want to leave that level of poverty for whatever they can do. Any day job, any day labor job in the U.S. is better than than what they have there.
Yeah, they're able to earn more money for sure. And it was interesting to see the difference in the attitudes of the different generations. The woman that I mentioned who learned how to hold a pencil, I taught her how to hold a pencil. She and her husband owned a little tiny store in the village, and she really didn't see any reason, any pressing reason to learn how to read and write. But then if you talk to the teenagers or the younger generation, they were like, yeah, we want to get an education. Although it was interesting, I talked to a couple of teenage girls and they told me all these plans that they had and ideas and dreams. And, they wanted to get an education and become lawyers and everything. When Earl talked to them, didn't they tell you that they wanted to marry and settle down and have kids? And it was very interesting. I hypothesized that talking to a woman, they felt more able to be open, and perhaps talking to a man, they thought I better give an answer that he would accept.
Yeah, or possibly hope that I would somehow be attracted to them specifically and take them back.
Possibly.
Take one of them back with me or something. Anyway, it was a very formative experience. Some of the activities outside of town, so just every weekend, Saturday morning on the early bus, we would go into Irapuato and usually travel. You go into the terminal. Is that what it's called in Mexican Spanish?
Mm-hmm. The main bus station. Central, I think.
Yeah, Venezuela, I think it's terminal. And then go to another city around, not too far from Irapuato, to do sightseeing on that Saturday, that same day, and then Sunday we'd go to church somewhere. LDS church, whatever city we were in. So we had some fun activities doing that. I often would need some space from all these 8 girls, so I would, just kind of wander around the city a bit and meet up with them later. It's not hard to spot a pack of 8 American girls walking around. Usually they weren't big cities, so it wasn't hard to find them.
That, I believe, though, was the beginning of him being able to find me anywhere. He often, if we go shopping or something, he'll drop me off. I'll find you in the store, and he always does. So, and I'm not as easy to pick out in the U.S. by myself as a group of 8 American girls in Mexico was, I assume.
Yeah. I think it was jumping back into the village, I think it was the first night that we were there. There was a party of some sort in a neighboring village.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you and Cammie, because Cammie spent the night with you and Sandy, right? You and Cammie and Sandy went with one of your family's members out there, and I heard that there was something going on, and I'm like, well, I'll just walk out there. So I walked out there, totally bushwhacking through the fields. And I don't think I have a flashlight yet. I just could see the lights. So yeah, I could hear the music and see the lights. I'm like, okay, it's just that way. So I'll just go that way.
There were a number of things that we did that we might not recommend.
Anyway, that was the first night. There's a festival. It was really fun to see that cultural experience. But there was also a bigger party in a village even farther away from our village that we couldn't have walked. It would have taken hours and hours to walk. I can't remember what it was. It was a bigger festival, bigger party of some sort.
There were all sorts of activities going on in this town. And it wasn't a big town, but it was much bigger than the village where we were staying. You're talking about the one in Aldama?
Aldama, yeah.
So this was when we'd take the bus down into Irapuato, we would get it in Comedero where we were staying, and then we would go to Aldama and pick up more people. And so it was a stop on the way down to Irapuato. Anyway, so we took the last bus out of the village. We took down to Aldama because we'd heard about this party, and we're like, yeah, let's go check it out. And so they had all sorts of activities going on, including horse races, and I don't even remember what all, dancing, music, always.
Yeah.
But we knew that we were taking the last bus, and we just kind of figured, we'll figure out a way to get back.
Either get back or somehow find
someplace
to sleep separately for the night. It was just early 20-year-olds, going on an adventure without
not
full
very
plan.
Smart. We ended up getting back to our village because a big military truck full of soldiers came by, and they saw us and stopped, and
We were hitchhiking.
we were hitchhiking, and they offered us a ride. And so it was a big open bed truck, really big. How many soldiers do you think were in the back?
10 plus, 10, 15 maybe.
So they said Earl could get in the back with the other soldiers, and they told me to get in the cab. So I went in the cab with them, a couple of guys in there. And so they were driving us. They're like, oh, yeah, we know where we're going. And so they started driving. I'm like, no, it's not this village. And they're like, no, we would know where we're going. I'm like, because there were two villages. One where we lived was Comedero, and then there was another one called Comederito. Mm-hmm. And they started heading out to Comederito. And I said, no, it's not this one. And so I convinced them to take us to Comedero.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, it wasn't our best.
Advisable.
But the whole summer was just one big adventure after another.
Yeah. I mean, speaking about the bus, though, I have to tell about the guy
with the.
So
goat.
one day, our village was at the end of the line. So in the morning, we were the first stop. And we got on one morning, and we're headed down. We hadn't quite made it to Aldama, which was about halfway to Irapuato. We hadn't made it to Aldama, and all of a sudden, and we had seen everybody get on, and all of a sudden, we heard a goat. And we're like, what was that? Anyway, the driver, stops in the middle of the road, just stops the bus, stands up, turns around, he's like, all right, who's got the goat? And we're all like, who's got a goat? And this guy had a little goat kid in a bag, and he's like, oh, you have it. So he had to put it in the storage underneath the bus. And we went on with the baby goat. We were all baffled, though, because we'd gotten on, we'd seen everyone get on, and had not noticed that there was a goat.
He had it in a bag.
He did have it in a bag.
Anyway, we went to a couple parties. It wasn't one big summer parties, by the way, but
our weekends were.
Yeah, these stand out. There was a wedding and or a third birthday party in Irapuato that we went with Cammie, who was kind of the student director of the 9 of us. She
had gone the summer before, so she knew more people than we did. And somebody that she knew, their kids were getting married, and so we went to that, a big Catholic marriage. We had gone, part of the prep class before we went to Mexico was to go to a misa, which is a Catholic mass, just so that we could, have an idea of how it worked. And so with the wedding, they had a misa, and so we went and watched that, and then we went to a 3-year-old birthday party. Well, do you remember anything about that?
The music was really loud. The music was so loud I could barely talk. Yeah. But that's something I remember about that night. We also decided to spend 6 days as a group, the 9 of us, in Puerto Vallarta on the Pacific coast of Mexico in the state of Jalisco, which was just to the west of Guanajuato. And so I can't remember, we came together into Irapuato from the various villages. The 3 of us had to go one way, and the other 6 had to go another way. Anyway, we met up at the Central, I think it's called Mexican Spanish, but in Terminal. I think Terminal is Venezuelan Spanish. And we took a night bus. It was through the night from Irapuato to... Did we go through Guadalajara on our way to Puerto Vallarta? It was a 9-hour bus ride.
It was really long.
It was a really long bus ride to get from Irapuato over to the coast, over to Puerto Vallarta.
And this night bus was nothing like a Harry Potter night bus, just FYI. This was just a big bus that went through the night.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was eventful in itself. Christy and I shared our first kiss that night on the bus. Anyway, so we spent, I think it was 6 days. It was from a Monday. I can't remember the exact details, but it was really fun. Warm water down there, and then one of the girls' boyfriends from the U.S. came down for some time, a couple days, maybe most of it, I'm not sure. Seemed like he was there for a good part of that trip.
Yeah, so that was fun. Like most of the time during the week, we were teaching all day, every day, or helping out around a house or in the fields or whatever. On the weekends, we would go in so that we could go to church, but then also on Saturdays, we would go to different cities and tour. But this one week, we took off and traveled out to the beach, and so that was a really fun experience. I remember that we rented a wave runner, and he and I shared the rental expense for that, and got a half an hour or whatever, and went out on the waves in the ocean. That was really fun.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And we did like a little,
like a cruise,
a day cruise.
But it was just down the coast, and we got off and did some activities on the coast, and like did a little hike, had lunch as part of the cruise, and went back up to Puerto Vallarta.
Yeah.
And I bought some sandals, some huaraches, I think they're called in Spanish, Mexican Spanish. Huaraches, right? Made out of like tires, like car tires was the sole, and leather, and an actual cobbler made them, created them,
I had some of those too.
nailed them together.
Mine I just bought from a vendor. He had to have his special made.
Yeah, he had to trace my foot because it was so big. He didn't have any on hand that were my size.
And we went to like a flea market where we did some bartering and, found different fun Mexican mementos, souvenirs, and stuff like that. I got a dress. And anyway, so at the end of the summer, most of the girls stayed home or went home. Did Hillary go down to...
It was just Jen, right? Jen and you and I were going to go. I got sick, so I stayed in Mexico City. But Jen and you
down
were...
to Michoacan.
To Morelia, Michoacan? Yeah, we went down. Jen was there. I remember Jen being there.
So one of our friends that I knew from BYU met us down in Mexico. She must have flown into Leon or something.
Yeah, probably so.
Anyway, she flew down, and then we took a bus. Her name is Jen. She and Earl and I went down to Michoacan, which is down south of Guanajuato, and we spent a weekend there, and then we went to Mexico City.
I can't remember if it was on the way back to Mexico City or if that was just...
I think that was a planned side trip. Anyway, just another area. Each area of Mexico is a little bit different. I mean, just like United States, there are some differences in the different regions. And so we went down to Morelia, and that was kind of a fun little weekend. And then we went to Mexico City, where we met up with a friend of mine who I worked with at the MTC. His family, he's Mexican, and his family lived there in Mexico City. And so we stayed with them for a weekend. And Earl got super duper sick.
Yeah, I think it's from an ice cream cone that I got from a street vendor who probably used not filtered water. And at that time, I don't know if it's still the case now, you couldn't drink unfiltered water in Mexico City.
Yeah.
At least I could.
So then you went home? Did we just leave you and take off?
Yeah, you took off. You and Jen took off, which was fine. So I had a couple days or so before my flight.
You stayed with Max?
The whole time, yeah.
Oh, okay. So Jen and I took off, and we were going to go with our friend Hillary. What happened?
Didn't Hillary go over there? Or was it just you and Jen?
It was just me and Jen. But I think Hillary showed up later or something. I can't remember for sure. Anyway, so Jen and I took a bus from Mexico City, and we had to go all the way around out to the Yucatan, which was a lot of bus. Lots and lots of hours in the bus. We had assumed that we could go to Veracruz and then take a ferry or something across, because Mexico is kind of shaped like this, right? And so we were over here, and we figured we could go to the coast, Veracruz, and then cross this water right here, but we couldn't. We had to go all the way around up to, what was it called?
Yucatan.
Cancun. We went to Cancun. So we stopped in Veracruz for a night and looked around there, and then we got on the bus, and that was like a 12-hour bus ride, I think. And we stopped in Hermosillo.
Hermosillo's up in north.
Villahermosa. And we had like a 4-hour break there, and then we took the bus the rest of the way to Cancun. And we were in Cancun for probably a week. This was after after the program ended in the summer. And so most everybody had gone home. And I just extended my stay, and Jen had met me down there to play. And so we went and saw the Mayan, the Mayan ruins over there at Chichen Itza. And we went to, we didn't go to Tulum. Anyways, we went out to Isla Mujeres and out to the beach. And anyway, we had a really great time. And then Hillary, who had been with me during the summer, she came back. And I think maybe her mom and her sister or something. And then anyway, Jen stayed with them, and they stayed for a while longer. But I went home.
So that is a half-hour rundown of our summer in Mexico in the year 2000 when we met, where we got to know each other because we just happened to be assigned to the same village. And so really got to know each other well in that village and the weekends as well. So yeah, be adventuresome, I guess, is the take-home message.
Here's one little memory. So along the river in the village, there were a bunch of trees. And one day I looked over, because the house where I was staying was up a little bit. And so you could look down at where the river was. And I looked down and I'm like, what on earth is going on down there? Well, he had gotten tired of the branches that were too low for him. And so he had borrowed a machete and was going and chopping off the branches that were hitting his head as he walked along.
I don't know if that was before or after I accidentally walked into barbed wire that hit me like a half inch below my right eye, because they had barbed wire as like clothesline. They put their clothes on so the wind wouldn't, blow it off. Anyway, I had my hat on, kind of looking down where I'm walking, and walked into barbed wire that stuck in, the barb, the pua, stuck into my skin. I had to pull back, and it came off of me. So that was a traumatic experience. And so I was like, I'm not going to get stabbed in the eye by some thorn on a tree. So I'm cutting these things down on the path that I usually take. So I did.
Anyway, he still has a scar under his eye, but he survived, and so did his eye, fortunately.
Yeah.
And anyway, we had lots of other adventures. Maybe we'll talk about those another time. But there you have a somewhat condensed version of how we met.